Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2522 of The Tom Woods Show, and I'm delighted to have Daniel McAdams back with us. He's executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. He's also co-host of the Ron Paul Liberty Report with Ron Paul, of course. And I wanted to talk to him, I don't know, about like what this mad world we have. But I do have some more kind of evergreen issues as opposed to what crazy thing is happening in the White House from day to day. I have some longer term questions I want to ask. So Daniel, welcome back.
Well, thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me back on your show. Always love coming on it.
Thank you. Oh, let's dig into this J.D. Vance situation a bit more, because when the decision was made, a lot of people talked about him, and then all the Biden craziness happened. So suddenly the attention got shifted over to that and got shifted over to videos of Kamala Harris, laughing like a hyena, and so that took over. But I think we didn't really finish the J.D. Vance conversation, and there's stuff to say here, because on the one hand, you say, well, he's not a neocon and he seems to have the right enemies. But on the other hand, it's like the anti-war right has always had some kind of fatal flaw in it. Like yes, they don't want intervention in Europe, but that's because they want to take the resources and direct them at Asia. Is there nobody who could just see through the whole racket? And it looks like Vance is one of those. I can't believe we're wasting all these resources on Ukraine when we could probably just work that all out, and we could instead send the weapons to Taiwan. So what do you think about it?
Well, the other thing I was going to say, there's a little shooting in there between the things that you mentioned.
Oh, to mention that.
That kind of took our attention off of Vance. I mean, I feel sorry for Vance. He hasn't gotten the scrutiny he deserves because of all these things that have happened once he's been named. But, my initial reaction, I'm trying to be positive, because there are a lot of people, there are a lot of libertarians who rightly, as soon as they saw the name, said, this guy is non-interventionist. This guy is a neocon. This guy's a bad guy. And I went out on Twitter actually tried to say a couple positive things, and I got, the usual attack, which is fair enough. I mean, I don't disagree with what people said about it. But when you're given the basket of names that Donald Trump could have picked for his vice president, I can't think of anyone that have been publicly touted, except perhaps Tulsi Gabbard, who has her own flaws. But that would be the only one that would have probably got my attention more than J.D. Vance, because he has been vocal about the money to Ukraine. He has questioned our adventures overseas. Now, he's done it in the context of a realist rather than a non-interventionist. And that's kind of a big deal, because there was a quote the other day where he said, well, the United States doesn't need to be involved in all conflicts overseas.
No one thinks that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things. Yeah, take away the word all, and I'm all with you, buddy. I'm completely with you. But just as you very correctly pointed out in your opener, Tom, the fact that John Bolton had an absolute panic attack when J.D. Vance's name came out, the fact that Bill Kristol had an anxiety attack and was popping Xanax left and right when the name came out, well, that tells you at least they're concerned. At least there's a crack in the wall. And as you know, remember, Tom, from the Ron Paul era, there would be, 300 and, however many votes for yes, and there would be one Ron Paul no. And who would get all the press calls? It would be Jeff Deist in Ron Paul's office saying, why the hell did he vote no? Well, ask the other people who voted yes. And so that's what it is. Their argument is so weak, I think, fundamentally, Tom, that when they see someone out there who may oppose the interagency consensus on these issues, they have a panic attack.
In a way, I think it is like the response to Trump himself, that if you sit down soberly and look at Trump's record, it's not a particularly radical record. He actually did plenty of things that on paper ought to satisfy moderates and even some left liberals. And there was no radical dismantling of anything. The checks kept going out with people's names on them, there was no disruption of that. But so I keep thinking, if a genuine right-winger ever took power, these people would be begging to have Trump back. They'd be begging for the, quote, fascist dictator to come back. If somebody actually governed the way they claim Trump will govern. I listen to some of the things they accuse him of being on the verge of doing, and I think, man, that's not a bad idea. Maybe he should do that.
If only.
Yeah. So I think it's the same thing with Vance. That, obviously he's not a Ron Paul, but the fact that he's not a 100% Bill Kristol is enough for them to be really hysterical. So, by the way, if I may say in parentheses, you must have seen that news item. Was it last week about Max Boot's wife?
There is a God. Right?
Yeah. So Max Boot, Max Boot and I have a long history. We fought with each other. It ended with him blocking me on Twitter. Well, all right, but Max is a neocon's neocon. I mean, there is no war he's seen that he didn't like. I can't even caricature him, because anything I say is not enough to describe what he's like. And he, of course, led the charge accusing Trump of being a secret agent and this and that. Turns out his own wife was a secret agent for South Korea, and that 8 weeks before this was made public, the two of them had co-authored an article together in the Washington Post saying that one of the reasons you shouldn't vote for Trump is he's not going to give enough money to South Korea. I mean, and so it goes to, as a matter of fact, Daniel, I think I know for a fact that you knew about this, because I think I saw you tweeting about it, and you said something like, basically everybody in the foreign policy establishment is, they're not all necessarily literally on the payroll, but it is the biggest bunch of phonies you can imagine.
It's the worst. It's worse. It's probably worse than econ people, and when you have things like the government of Qatar and how many think tanks they give money to in DC, it's all run by this. And the other thing about someone like Max, but okay, there is some divine justice here. There are two things that come to mind immediately. Number one, it's kind of embarrassing. I hate to say it, but I guess there's no pillow talk between Mr. and Mrs. Boot. There wasn't, hey, honey, where'd you get that nice sushi and that nice fur coat? Because you remember, apparently she did it for high-end sushi dinners.
Yeah,
wow,
she was cheap. She was a cheap date, this woman.
and fur coats or whatever else she did. It was only like $30,000. But it's hard to believe that she didn't come home and say, hey, honey, I'm home. How about if we write an article about Korea? I have some excellent talking points. And what's that whiteout on the bottom? Oh, there's nothing. It just says the Embassy of Korea or something. I mean, it's just hard to believe that there was no discussion, that he didn't know a thing about it. And the other thing that is quite annoying to me, and maybe this, marks me as a nationalist or something. I resent when people emigrate to the U.S. from a foreign country and they import all the problems they left back home. Now Max Boot has his roots in Russia, and for whatever reason, I don't know the details. I'm not interested. He hates Russia's guts. That's fine. You do what you want. Do whatever. But you've come over here, and now you made your personal vendetta. And the same is true with Victoria Nuland's family, Donald Blinken's family. They're all from the Ukraine area. They bring all these ancient disputes over to the U.S. They infiltrate our government, and then they expect us to fight these battles that they should have left behind. I find that extremely irritating.
Oh, I always say, leave your stupid ethnic hatreds at the door. And because also, could you imagine? I mean, what kind of a person are you that you're going to bring your quarrels to some country that has nothing to do with it, and you're going to drag them in for your own selfish reasons? I mean, a normal person doesn't act like that. I was reminded of this Max Boot situation because we were trying to figure out why would there be such a hysterical response at J.D. Vance. And so some of it, I'm sure, is ideological, but most of it, I think, is, well, let's see, part of the most of it is there are, let's say, rather base motives at work. There's money at stake. There are positions and power at stake. The prestige. There's anything that might threaten whatever payroll these people are on, or whatever. What the whole foreign policy establishment with its conferences and it's this, that, and the other thing, blowing money left and right. It's fun to be on that particular gravy train. Anything that might remotely threaten that, I think, just sends them crazy. But now, I was just talking to Scott Horton about this. All of a sudden, he's out of the blue. He's talking about Iran. Like, what? This is supposed to be an America First guy. And in fact, the other day, who was it? Mark Levin was talking about Iran and this, that, and the other thing. And I said, Mark, we're all America First now, so you can leave those ethnic hatreds at the door. Like you can go fight your own wars. And yet, with a guy like Vance, America First means, okay, the Ukraine thing's a problem. We have a lot of problems at home, but they're not so important that we can't also be intervening in where? Israel, China and Taiwan, and heaven knows where else.
Yeah.
And I hate to be the burst. I like to be the guy who says he's got some really strong points, mm-hmm. and I do think he has some strong points.
Yeah, he said, punch him hard.
Yeah, I mean,
one of the things I hate about the area of expertise, quote unquote, that I've chosen is that it's really a bummer, because I think the problem is that J.D. Vance is not a foreign policy expert. He's not schooled in foreign policy. What he does get, he probably gets mostly from the mainstream media and from people around him. And we know very well, I remember, listening to Tucker Carlson talk to Thomas Massey about how things work in D.C., and it's exactly right. Now he talked about AIPAC handler, but you get a neocon handler. The neocons are the experts. So when you get to D.C., the first thing they do, the neocons will do, is say, hey, well, we've got a great foreign policy staffer for you. He's been around forever. He knows everything about everything, and your work will be that much easier. You can have more time to attend fundraisers and have fine sushi dinners with Max Booth's wife, whatever you want to do, that's fine. We will take care of all that for you. And the member says, that sounds great. And don't worry, we'll make you sound tough, Mr. Senator. And so there's this idea in fact, I want to give a speech. I want to do a speech called Peace Through Strength and talk about what it really means. Because they have this distorted idea of what peace through strength means. Peace through strength is that you threaten everyone, you kick sand in their face, and then you lord it over them. Well, the rest of the world is saying we've had enough of it. And that's a fact. But I think fundamentally, J.D. Vance is not a bad guy. He just doesn't understand foreign policy. And the people, you can bet, Tom, that are glomming on to him right now. On the one hand, it's the neocons slapping him upside the head. On the other hand, it's the neocons like Lindsey Graham, cajoling him and visiting with him and being his best friend. And that's what's going to happen. So that's the big danger right now. And I would love for someone like J.D. Vance to reach out to people that we know well. Scott's great. Our friend Doug McGregor's great. Reach out to people who I know a little bit about stuff, who understand how the world works, or really not that radical people, and get kind of a counter briefing and understand that there is a way to have strength. Strength comes from restraint, not necessarily acting on your initial impulses.
Hey, folks, I hope you'll let me be blunt here. I'm a pretty productive guy. And I'll tell you, part of the reason I get so much done is that I'm impatient with fluff. Just get to the point. And sometimes you need to say that to books. Just tell me what you need to tell me already. You don't need these 300 pages. You probably need about 25 in the case of a lot of books. And that's what the Blinkist app does for thousands of nonfiction books in 27 different categories. It just gets rid of all the fluff. And it just gives you the heart of the matter. You can absorb the Blinkist summary in just 15 minutes of reading or listening. What a time to be alive. Among the thousands and thousands of titles at Blinkist, you'll find libertarian classics as well. So this is a good company. They actually have diversity of opinion. How about that? Very rare this day and age. You'll find Murray Rothbard. You'll find Milton Friedman. You'll even find old Tom Woods. Well, right now, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Woods to start your 7-day free trial and get 40% off a Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/Woods to get 40% off and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/Woods. And now for a limited time, you can even use Blinkist Connect to share your premium account. You get 2 premium subscriptions for the price of 1. Well, no kidding. And not to mention, I don't expect somebody to be perfect, but my gosh, I feel like I'm constantly dealing with extremely imperfect people. And in the case of Vance, I'm sympathetic to some aspects of the direction of the Republican Party, but honestly, this trade stuff is just stupid. I mean, for example, if we're looking at steel, there are X number of jobs relating to steel in the U.S., but there are like 100X jobs that involve industries that need steel, and that the protective tariff is going to make steel absurdly expensive, and that's the whole point of it. And so you're going to damage all these other companies and put all these other people out of work, but those people are invisible. All we care about are the jobs that we are pointing out and earmarking specifically. The steel jobs. Yeah, I don't doubt that you could probably maintain some jobs in steel making. I have no doubt you could do that. In the same way that I'm sure Norway has had some good results with its welfare state, because if you have that much money, I'm sure some good came out of it. How could it not? But the point is, there are all these other things that are simply invisible, and then then we'll have that problem, and that'll be blamed on trade. So then you'll get another wave causing further I mean, come on here. Like, we've got to at least have a conversation about this.
Yeah, I remember when I was working for Dr. Paul on the Hill, I had a little tiny bit of trade in my portfolio, particularly on foreign trade. And we had several people from our district down here on the Gulf Coast of Texas. Back then, it was a little bigger geographically than it is today. But they were the manufacturers of and I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but they were manufacturers of very specialized, very high-end steel. And they relied on the raw materials and things that they got from China and elsewhere. So they were terrified of this wave of protectionism. They said, you're going to put us out of business, and trust us. These are very, very well-paid jobs, manufacturing very, very important types of steel, I don't know, aircraft, whatever they use them for. So you're right. You're absolutely right, Tom. People don't understand the implications of these tariffs.
Now, but back to foreign policy specifically, what do you think about the likelihood that a second Trump term will be restrained in foreign policy? And in the first term, it was more restrained than other presidents have been. But my wife is concerned that after October 7th, this changes things, that the kinds of people who are going to influence him and the kinds of ideas floating around out there and the commitments that are going to be demanded of him, it's possible that maybe we'll see a different kind of Trump. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I have some contacts that are plugged into the area, and I don't claim on having very, very super spicy ones. But from what I've heard, it at this point, and it's very early on, it's a little bit disturbing, because I'm hearing people like O'Brien, who was his national security advisor when my good friend Doug McGregor was in, and Doug is not my source on this, who was, when my friend Doug McGregor was the advisor to the acting Secretary of Defense, O'Brien hated Doug's guts. He did not want us to get out of Syria or Afghanistan. He is pretty much a dyed-in-the-wool neocon. And it's him. It's people like, I don't know if you saw this report, Tom, that came out a couple of weeks ago. It was General Kellogg and Fred Fleitz. Now, these are a couple of really B or C team neocons. Very, very far from the sharpest knives in the drawer. They came out with an idea, a peace plan for Ukraine and Russia, which was a watered-down version of the Minsk 1 and 2 accords that Russia agreed to the first time and second time, that were completely discounted. And even we heard Angela Merkel said, well, we just signed that so we'd have more time to arm the Ukrainians, so they'd have a better shot at the Russians. Russia is not going to go for this. They are winning on the battlefield. And the idea that little Freddie Fleitz is going to, here's my report, Mr. President, here's what we need to do. I mean, so from what I hear, these are the kinds of people that at this point have glommed on to President, or former and perhaps future President Trump, to round out his foreign policy team. There's another guy I can't remember. Oh yeah, he is he's the grandson of a CIA director. What was his name? Colby, I think it was. And himself a very hardcore neocon. A super China hawk is his thing. So from what I'm seeing initially, I don't feel very confident, but things can change. Things can change. I mean, we heard him talk about some decent things when he was at the LP convention. The fact that he went to the LP convention says a lot. It says that he's willing to broaden his perspective, and I think that's something that we can glom onto and be happy about.
Yeah, that's true. It's just that because he's so not grounded in anything.
The last guy he talks to, you know.
Yeah, whoever the last person he talks to, he'll adopt that person's opinion. So I think, you know, to the extent that we have any friends around him, they need to just wait. Have him talk to everybody and then sweep in there, because whereas there are at least some people in public life where I'm going to know where they stand on things. I mean, I know who Mitt Romney is. I don't care for him, but I know who he is. And when he stabs me in the back, I figure, well, that's what Mitt Romney does. And I'm
he's
not
the
surprised.
Snake.
You're
the toad, he's the snake.
Yeah, exactly. But so he didn't just get done giving a speech about how he's tired of America being dragged into all these foreign wars. He's doing the dragging, so I know who he is. But Trump sometimes sounds like one guy, acts like another, and then sometimes sounds like a third or fourth guy.
Yeah. Well, in Trump 1.0, there were a group of libertarian-minded people in the West Wing. And I know because they reached out to me. They wanted me to help organize a call between President Trump and Ron Paul. And we did arrange the call. We made it happen. I don't know how hardcore they were libertarian, but they definitely were libertarian-leaning. They convinced President Trump that there's a big group of libertarians out there that would like you to listen to us a little bit on policy. And it was very successful. As far as I understand, those people are not around Trump right now. I hope they return to being around Trump. I hope he listens to them because they were absolutely spot on when they did that. And it was a very brave and bold move.
Wow, I didn't know about that. Well, I'm glad that at least happened. Nice to be able to repeat that. I mean, there are people now in the GOP who have some degree of following, who are, I wish the world were better. I know as I talk like this, people think, oh my gosh, you're just begging for scraps. I'm not begging for anything. I'm describing the situation we have. And I'm saying that there are people who are 80% sympathetic to us, that they're not completely in the saddle yet, but there is, I think there's a shift. And I think if Trump came out and said, we're going to have a whole complete revamping of our foreign policy, and I'm doing a clean sweep of various departments, and in terms of the people I'm going to for advice, it's going to be new people, because these people, I mean, what have they accomplished other than blowing a lot of money? I'm going to be talking to new people. His base would go along with that, no problem. If he would lead them down that road, they are prepared to be led, I feel like.
No, you're absolutely right. And you can absolutely frame it in an America First way. You can also frame it, in a peace through strength way. I mean, the peace part is important. And you can also frame it in terms of the economics of it. We have sent $200 billion to Ukraine to do what? To lose a war with Russia. Is this really the best use of our resources? What could we have built in our country? And the fact of the matter is, because we've done that, we've already offshored all of our production of defense materials. We can't produce. There was a huge, and I don't have it in front of me, but Reuters, of all things, did an in-depth study of what happened to our ability to create the 55 milliliter shells or millimeter shells, whatever they are, the shells that they use for tanks. And the fact that the entire process has been corrupted for decades. So all the money we spend does not go toward getting us the greatest military in the world, not to denigrate the people who serve, because there's a lot of great people who serve, and we know that. There's a lot of great patriots, but the system is corrupt from top to bottom. This $200 billion did not go to Ukraine, and it did not go to fighting Russia. Most of it went, as you know very well, Tom, it went to politically connected people who come up with tons of harebrained schemes. We remember Peter Van Buren's book, We Meant Well, about all of the cockamamie schemes that as soon as you come up with a crazy scheme, funded to the hilt. Let's teach Afghan women how to raise eggs and chickens. Yeah, here it is, $100 million. It's the craziest thing you can imagine. Propose it. We got to get rid of this money. It's already been appropriated. If you can find a way to educate the American people that this does not forward our interests, it impoverishes us, and a day of reckoning is coming, you're absolutely right. I think they would come to our perspective. That's what we try to do every day on the Liberty Report. But as you know, Tom, sometimes you feel like you're talking to a blank wall.
I was trying to see if Scott could answer this question. I said, if I were to survey, let's say, members of Congress today, I could find some members of Congress who have one opinion on Israel and Palestine, and congressmen have another opinion on that subject. I could find people who have one opinion on Ukraine and people who have another opinion on Ukraine. But can I find people who have a different opinion on China? Or is basically everybody a China hawk?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things that not to go down memory lane, but one of the things that I do remember when we did Thursday lunches with Dr. Paul is that the members would often say very different things behind closed doors when they knew they were completely off the record than they'd say on the floor. There is a herd mentality. Nobody wants to be the skunk at the party. No one wants to be Linus, going around with a cloud of stench around you. The only person who seems to be able to withstand the slings and arrows of unpopular opinions is Thomas Massie right now.
Yeah.
And they should take heart. He's proven that you can actually take, philosophically honest positions and win by a wide margin. They should take that to heart. So while there may be people behind the scenes, they don't have, the Israelis have a pretty good lobby, right? I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. Whether you like them or dislike them, they're not bad at it. The Chinese are not very good at it. Neither are the Russians. So, their skills in terms of explaining why our relationship should be more of a symbiosis, why we don't want to have war with you because you're our customers, why these things would be beneficial for the United States. You're not going to get it from them. When I was on the Hill, I met with all kinds of foreign representatives. That was my job. And so I regularly had lunch with someone from the Chinese embassy. And I tried to convince him, and this was, the mid 2000s, that, there's going to be a period of de-dollarization. You are buying tons and tons of dollars. You're importing tons and tons of dollars and sending out tons and tons of goods. This is going to come to an end. This is not sustainable. The dollar is a fiat currency. And he looked at me as if I had just come down from Mars or something, He was not a stupid man, but it just didn't register with him that this was an inevitability. And now we're openly discussing it. Even Yellen said the other day, well, all of our sanctions, actually, it's leading to de-dollarization, and it's hurting us rather than hurting Russia and everyone else.
Folks, it's Old Woods here, and I am that good angel whispering in your ear, because we often put off things we know we should do, and I'm that good angel urging you to do them. And in particular, I want you to remember the safety net that life insurance provides. If something were to happen to you, your family could cover their expenses while getting back on their feet, and Policygenius will help you do that. I have tremendous peace of mind because my family is fully provided for with my life insurance policy, and it's less expensive than you think. But move quickly because it does increase in price as you get older. With Policygenius, though, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Even if you already have a life insurance policy through work, it may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, and it might not follow you if you change jobs. So with just a few clicks, you'll be comparing quotes from top insurers and finding your lowest price. The licensed award-winning agents at Policygenius can help you find the best fit for your needs. They're unbiased. They work for you, not the insurance companies. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. So don't put off life insurance. Make it easy with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description or on the show notes page to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. I saw recently that 44% of Ukrainians, so you got 21% undecided, 44% of Ukrainians are saying that they are ready to open negotiations with Russia. So it's a plurality. So that's an interesting number. So do you think that, even if the worst candidate gets elected, do you think that there's a natural unwinding of the conflict in Ukraine that's going to happen regardless of what the American regime wants? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think Americans are in for a wake-up call, because unless Vladimir Putin does something that will truly, the U.S. has spent so many years trying to undermine his authority and popularity at home to no avail. In fact, to the opposite effect. The one thing that could undermine his authority and popularity and could indeed lead to him being overthrown is for him to sign a deal that gets them just about what they had, before 2022, where you have a NATO on your doorstep, you have a Ukraine continuing to be militarized, and you have suppression of the massive, overwhelming number of ethnic Russians, many of them Russian passport holders in eastern Ukraine. If the idea is to return to status quo ante, and Putin signs on to that, he signed his death warrant, and I mean that figuratively, hopefully not literally. So that's just a fact on the ground. Russia has not expended this much blood and treasure to say, gosh, okay, guys, you got us. We're gonna go back to it. They're going to get a maximalist result out of this conflict. They're in it. They were so hesitant. They waited 10 years to launch it. They begged, they pleaded, they put forth proposals for 10 years. That shows them to be very, very much the restrained country that Americans don't understand. So the idea that you're going to impose a fact on the ground to Russia is just not going to happen. It's quite the opposite. But I think you also see a Russia that wants to find a way to calm down the tensions, because they see that where things are going, and they're not going to a good place right now. And so I think, Donald Trump, look, I saw that you had Gladden from Hungary on. I have to watch that show. I haven't seen it yet. But Viktor Orban, who expended an enormous amount of political capital, and I don't want to repeat what he said. I haven't watched the episode yet. I'm about to when we finish. Who expended an enormous amount of political capital as he took over the EU presidency, saying, I'm going on a peace mission. I'm going to Moscow. I'm going to Kiev. I'm going to Beijing. I'm going to talk to people. You idiots, you just want war. You're going to destroy the world. I think we should talk to each other. Now, that kind of thing, I think, could find a solution. And hats off to him for doing it. Look how much he's been ridiculed for it.
Yeah, no kidding. And so I did that episode just because, whenever somebody tells me that so-and-so is a right-wing authoritarian, I want to know the truth. Tell me, if that is true, I want to know that. And if it's the same way that Trump was an authoritarian, okay, well, so in other words, no different from Franklin Roosevelt or any of the people these very same individuals lionize. Okay, now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I haven't talked to Viktor for a long time, but I used to work for him, and I knew him fairly well at the time when I lived in Hungary. So I know quite a bit about him, and I know quite a bit about the people around him. There are not very many right-wing authoritarians who go on a peace mission. It's usually the opposite.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, part of fascist ideology is an adulation of the military. So that is a little bit of an odd thing. Looking at 2024, not just from point of view of foreign policy, but just overall, going into November, do you have any cautious optimism? Because I feel like the Biden years have been really bad, and I was not like this before. I wouldn't spend my time talking about what a terrible President Obama was, because he was just like all the others. I mean, he was marginally different, but you can't get too worked up about individuals. You got to focus on the regime itself. But geez, Joe Biden made it hard to abide by that because of how everything has gone wrong. So do you feel like, there's nowhere to go but up, or what's your outlook?
Yeah, I mean, even Obama, for all the horrible things he did a couple of good things. I mean, he did get us the Iran deal, which was brave diplomacy. I mean, his own party hated him. Everyone hated him for it, and he brought it forth. He repaired relations with Cuba. So he did a few good things. There were things to look up to. But you're right with the Biden administration, I can't point to a single foreign policy success from our perspective. So I mean, I'm with you. I mean, you're a lifelong educator. You've actually educated my 3 kids. Thanks very much, by the way, through the Ron Paul curriculum, and done a terrific job of it. Made them skeptics and critical thinkers, which is so important. But so I think we kind of have we have sort of a 2-pronged approach. We continue with the education, but at the same time, there is room for cautious optimism, because Trump may surprise you and do the right thing. Now, he may not describe it right. For example, when he lobbed a few bombs into Syria, I was furious. I blew my lid. I said he should be impeached, whatever. But at the same time, it was a terrible, stupid thing to do, because it was a lie. There was no chemical attack, what have you. But he could have blew up Damascus. Instead, he said, "Hey, get me some factory where nobody's there. I got to blow something up." I mean, so he's not going to do what we want, but he's not going to do the worst imaginable thing, which is what Biden has done.
Okay, fair enough. How many years have you guys been doing the Ron Paul Liberty Report, by the way?
Since 2015, April 2015, every day.
Every day. Yeah. I saw the other day, because I guess you guys had a hurricane, and so you had power outages and stuff. So you were we got to see Dr. Paul's office broadcasting behind him.
Yeah, that's his home office. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I bet he's read every one of those books. I mean, if you go in there, you'll see. I mean, it's all the greats, and I know that he's read all of them.
I hope so, because when I've been in there, I've seen my own books in there. So
that's right. That's right.
That's very
Tom Woods
nice.
section. Absolutely.
But the funny thing was, when he came on in that episode where you guys were broadcasting from home instead of in the studio, he was kind of apologetic. He said, I don't really want to broadcast from here because I have all these books all over the place in the background. And not only do we not care that Dr. Paul's office is not absolutely just so, but no, actually all we're doing is we're actually scanning the back to see if there's any way we can make out the titles. So just want to know what you have.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We should do a tour of his library someday. That would be a fun show.
Yeah. Oh, I bet it would. I bet. And what would be a great show would be for him just to comment on a few random books that he picks up.
Well, you should come out sometime. You and him could do a show like that. That would be fantastic.
That would be an enjoyable show. I would appreciate that. Tell us about your upcoming. You have a conference coming up.
Yeah, August 31st. It's in Dulles, Virginia. We call it DC, but it's not DC because DC's terrible. The Dulles one is great because you fly into Dulles, boom, you're there. It's at the Hilton out there. And the idea behind it, Tom, and thanks for asking, by the way, is that we know there's going to be a platform. We just saw the Republican platform, the Democrat platform. There's going to be Green platform, this platform, Neocon platform, whatever. So we wanted to kind of do the Liberty platform to touch on some of the things that we think they're important, and to try to kind of step back a little bit from what we usually do, which is heavy foreign policy and civil liberties. So we did a little bit different this time. We have, and I know you know this gentleman, Dr. Joe Mercola is going to be there, and he's going to talk about medical freedom. He's going to talk about being canceled for being a scientist, which is what happened to him during COVID. We have my old friend Joel Salatin of Polyface Farms, who has pioneered the idea that you can be a serious environmentalist and a serious capitalist, and feed people in an extremely healthy manner and save the world, save the planet. He's going to be there, and I've known Joel for a long time. I used to be a customer, but we also have great people like Professor John Mearsheimer, who I think is from the realist school, but he's one of the best out there. And we have our old friend Judge Angie Napolitano, who's going to talk about the Bill of Rights in natural law, and I think that's going to be great to have him back as well. We have my old friend Jeff Deist is going to be speaking there. Jeff, as you know, spent 10 years at Mises. And also was Dr. Paul's chief of staff. He's now in the private sector, but we're thrilled to have him back again. So this is going to be a great event. We're going to just kind of cover the gamut of what it means to have a liberty platform. It's all encompassing. It's like you've always said, and Dr. Paul has always said, there's not like here's the foreign policy part and here's the economics part. No, I mean, you talk about the Fed, you're talking about foreign policy, you're talking about monetary policy. They're all intertwined, and I really, I see the Ron Paul Institute moving in that direction toward understanding that you can't compartmentalize these things. And so I think this will probably be our first step in that direction. But we have some tickets available. They're going pretty well. We're really happy about the ticket sales, but we'd love to have Tom Woods people there enjoying it. We'd love to see them and talk to them as well.
So do they just go to the Ron Paul Institute website?
Yeah, ronpaulinstitute.org. You'll see like in the right margin toward the top, there's a little thing you can click on and get your tickets right there.
All right, excellent. I highly encourage people to attend. You guys put on an excellent event every single year, and it's important stuff. And what you're saying about you can't compartmentalize things. Let me wrap up with this. In fact, I may elaborate on this in the very next episode of the show. But, lately there are a lot of people on what we might call the dissident right who are very focused on, the friend-enemy distinction and on the culture war. And I completely sympathetic to that. But the little bit of the implication is that economics is kind of for nerds, and we have to focus on what really matters, like family and faith and this and that. And I feel like that is really short-sighted because things that happen in the economy affect these other things. If you have high inflation, that affects families. That affects the culture. And if the economy is going in wild swings up and down, that affects the culture. That affects well, anyway, as I say, I'm gonna develop this in another episode, but I think it's a mistake to say, oh yeah, the stupid libertarian nerds used to want to talk about economics, but we are more sophisticated than that now, and we know that the issues that all needs to be talked about because it's all of a piece.
Yeah. And you and Jeff Deist are two of the people that really stand out to me as someone who can tie all these together, and it's just so important. I mean, as you know, Tom, I run in rad trad circles. So I run into a lot of people who are exactly as you talk about. I don't want to hear about this free market economy stuff. I'm into distributism or something, God love you, but you know what? You can do that on your own, but you got to get the state off your back.
Yeah. Because I mean, at worst, typically, you have the left and their crazy ideas, but at quote best, I'll have the right, which will have, nice intentions. We want to help families, but everything they do is going to undermine families. Absolutely every last thing that they do is going to make it worse. And then when things get worse, well, they'll know what's causing that. They haven't done enough of their policy. And it's like, yay. So we have work to do, my friend Daniel, but check out ronpaulinstitute.org, just in and of itself, but also so that you can attend the conference, which is coming right up in just over a month from the time that we're speaking. So Daniel, and of course, there's more to the world. It's hard to believe that there's more to the world than the Tom Woods Show. There is also the Ron Paul Liberty Report that I think you'll enjoy very much if you check that out. So thanks so much, Daniel.
Thanks so much, Tom.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of the Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.